All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Camholz, and I am the outreach intern for Madison. Today, we will be hearing from Renew Wisconsin's Sam Deniski, Nancy Vetter-Schultz from First Unitarian Society, and Kurt Reinhold from Legacy Solar Co-op. The presentation will last about 45 minutes with time at the end for questions. I'll be sending around some corresponding links in the chat throughout the presentation with more information. If you do have a question during the presentation, feel free to use the chat function on the bottom bar or the raise hand function, and the presenters will be happy to answer any questions you may have. We do ask you keep yourself muted and your video off just to preserve bandwidth because this is a larger meeting and we want to ensure that everyone can hear the presentation well. So with that, I will pass it over to our first presenter, Sam Deniski from Renew Wisconsin.
Thank you, Morgan, and thank you everyone for being here with us today, for taking time out of your schedules. We are going to talk today about solar for nonprofit organizations. I am, like I said, Sam Deniski from Renew Wisconsin. I'm the program manager here. For those of you that don't know much about Renew, we are a renewable energy advocacy organization. We promote renewable energy policy programs and education across the state. And we also have some other great partners with us today on the webinar. We're going to be hearing from some folks from Legacy Solar Co-op and also from First Unitarian Society as well. Also want to certainly recognize the Couliard Solar Foundation too. So a lot of great partners with us today on this webinar, so thanks to them for joining us as well. The main thing that I want you all to take away from today's webinar is how to go solar. And to kind of gauge where everyone is at, I would like to have a poll put up, just kind of see where everyone is coming from. So Morgan, if you could put that poll up so we could just get some background information on where everybody's coming from today, that would be great.
Just 1 minute while I pull this up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard there.
No problem.
While Morgan's bringing that up, we're just going to go over some basic points here on how to go solar. So these are the things that you should be looking for later on in the presentation. The first thing is what we're going to do in this presentation. We're going to learn about solar, and we're going to give you the tools to evaluate whether or not solar is right for your organization or not. The next step in going solar as a nonprofit, this is a Solar for Nonprofit webinar, is to get some proposals from some solar contractors. We're also going to give you some information on how to do that as well. Ask questions, another really, really big step in the process. We're going to give you a lot of information, but I guarantee you we're not going to be able to give you all of the information. Every solar project, every organization is a little bit different in how it's structured and how things work. So definitely ask questions, get specifics on what solar looks like for your organization. Next step, finances. We're going to arm you with some programs, some grants, some incentives, some other financing tools too, to help get these paid for. Of course, nonprofits don't have a lot of disposable income, especially not these days. So we're going to try to give you, again, arm you with as much information as possible so you can help not only make that decision, but just see if it is feasible economically for your organization. And then finally, we're also going to, and the last step is really just to decide. You have to weigh all of those options that we talked about before, and then just see if it is right for your organization at this time. So with that said, Morgan, do we have a poll up?
We are having some tech issues with the poll, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, that's fine. We'll go on. If it comes up, just let me know. We're going to go over, so we talked a little bit about what we're going to, how we're going to take us through that solar journey, but these are the exact topics of the agenda. First, we're going to talk about solar basics. I did see at least a few solar developers and contractors on this call, so we're going to keep it pretty high level. If there are more specific questions, we can certainly address those at the end of the talk. Then we're going to hear from First Unitarian Society. This is basically a case study on how a nonprofit can go solar and do it in a great way. After we hear from Nancy at First Unitarian, we're going to go back and talk a little bit more about programs and other incentives, grants, and things like that. Then we're going to hear from Legacy Solar Co-op as well, hear about what their organization does. And then we'll close with some overall financial information, and then hopefully save some time as well at the end for a little Q&A session too. So we're going to jump right in. Most of you probably have at least a basic idea of how solar works, but I want to make sure that everyone's kind of starting off on the same playing field. So we're just going to go over some really high level basic solar stuff here to make sure everyone is on the same page. First, in order to do that, we have to go over some commonly used terms. The first term that you're going to hear thrown around a lot if you start going down this solar path is kilowatt. Kilowatt is basically just the amount of energy or the capacity of energy that we have in a solar array. So think about kilowatt as almost kind of how many solar panels you might need to power your business. So, or you're a nonprofit, excuse me. The next term is kilowatt hour. This is the amount of energy provided over a period of time. So typically when we look to see what size an array a nonprofit might need, we'll talk about how many kilowatt hours that uses per month or per day or per year, depending on what unit of time we're looking at. Solar cell is another term that may come up sporadically throughout the talk. If you look at that image right there, that is clearly of a solar panel. The smaller squares within that solar panel are the solar cells. They actually convert the photons into energy. A solar array is what we talk about when we discuss a collection of solar panels all together at one time generating power. And then a solar system is very similar, but a solar system is all of the components of a solar system, I guess. The panels, the wiring, the inverters, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the commonly used terms. If you're not really familiar with them, hopefully that should bring you up to speed a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to go over just some real basics with solar. Again, we can get into specifics later on. And when we talk about solar, we're going to be talking about grid-tied solar arrays. There's a misconception that when you go solar, you're off grid, you have batteries, things like that. That is a possibility. Those systems, however, are a little bit more unique. Grid-tied solar arrays probably make up at least 99% of the solar arrays that get installed in Wisconsin, and for good reason. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that works. But essentially, the physical process works by the sunshine here will hit your panels. Those solar panels produce what we call DC electricity or direct current. That DC current then flows down into your inverter. The inverter is the other main component of the solar system besides the solar panels. The inverter then converts it into AC electricity or alternating current, which is what most of our electronics, our appliances, et cetera, use. So after the inverter converts it over to AC electricity, it then flows into your building. This is a house, but it works the same way, whether it's a church, whether it's a humane society, a food pantry, et cetera, et cetera. And it powers all of your appliances, hopefully. At night, on very, very cloudy days, when your solar array is not producing enough electricity, you can still take in what you need off the grid. So this is really good because especially, in Wisconsin, when we have those short days and nights in the wintertime, you're able to take in power off the grid without any disruption in service. So there's really no change in how your organization will operate. The other good thing about a grid-tied solar array is quite often, especially this time of year during the middle of the day, right about now, your solar array is actually going to produce more electricity than you need. And what happens then is that electricity, instead of flowing through your circuit box and into your lights, your appliances, et cetera, it actually goes back out onto the grid and it flows out to whoever needs that power. And your utility meter will actually dial backwards. And this is something that we call net metering. Net metering is a policy that it varies by utility, but it's basically a way for receiving credit for that extra solar electricity that you produce and don't consume in real time. I like to use the analogy of rollover minutes on a cell phone, although it has definitely come to my knowledge that analogy has become a little bit outdated. So I'm gonna have to find a new analogy, but hopefully most of you can remember what rollover minutes on a cell phone is like. So this is kind of like rollover electricity, essentially. And I'm a visual learner, so this is a great representation of how net metering works, kind of in real time. So this is over the course of a day. This is a real solar system. So as you can see, this building is consuming power kind of sporadically here throughout the day. Their solar array sort of turns on, if you will, at about 7 o'clock in the morning. It continues to ramp up power until a little bit after noon. And then when the sun starts to dip in the horizon, that production goes down until the sun sets completely at around 7 o'clock at night. So what you need to take away from this figure here is the area in red is where this building, this facility, is using electricity. The area in green is the electricity that is produced by the solar array. Now the area in blue is where that solar electricity is being used by this facility in real time. So as you can see, that area, the area under that curve, if you will, is much smaller than both the red and the green areas. And this is a really good representation of why net metering and net metering policies are so important. Essentially, what we're able to do is we're able to take that area in green and kind of evenly distribute it throughout the areas in red. So basically, you're able to offset all of your electricity over the course of a day or a month or even a year, even if you're not actually doing it in real time. So that was a real quick down and dirty discussion of how basics of how solar energy works. I am now going to shift the talk over to Nancy at First Unitarian Society. And Nancy is going to talk about what First Unitarian did and how a real life example of how a nonprofit can do solar. So take it away, Nancy.
Cool down, cool down. Oh, Mama Gaia, we will cool you down. Cool down, cool down. Oh, Mama Gaia, we will cool you down. So thanks, Sam. Yes, I'm here as a founding member of the Climate Justice Action Team at First Unitarian Society. And I want to tell you the inspiring story of our solar project. So next slide. Actually, the next one after that. So since its inception, First Unitarian has considered itself green, but the definition of that term has changed over the years. Next slide. Our meeting house was designed 70 years ago by Frank Lloyd Wright, considered by many the father of green architecture. Wright wanted his buildings to harmonize with their surroundings. Next slide, please. As a result, he used the forms and colors of nature as his design touchstones, but he also used a lot of single pane glass to blur the boundaries between indoors and outdoors, and that's not something that we would consider green today. And it's cost us a lot more money and a lot more energy use than many of us at First Unitarian would like to have seen. Next slide. As one of Wright's best known designs, the original meeting house was named a National Historic Landmark. Being the stewards of this treasure, we've been careful to preserve it and to avoid incompatible uses. Next slide, please. Given that history and that beauty, we made national news 12 years ago when we expanded in a way that would both protect the green aesthetics of the Wright building and also move us towards a green sustainability. Next slide, please. If you asked anyone at First Unitarian, you would hear how proud we are of this gorgeous and this green new building that we've put up. Next slide, please. And we're not the only ones. The new addition with a geothermal heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, as well as a green roof that you can see here, received a gold level LEED certification, the globally recognized symbol of sustainable leadership and achievement. But despite an interest in solar at the time, we weren't able to generate the needed funds. Next slide, please. The new addition left us with hefty utility bills, and given the source of electricity in Madison, it left us with large greenhouse gas emissions. So of course, discussions continued about how to change over to renewables and to increase our efficiency. Next slide, please. Our 2017 capital campaign proposed $70,000 for solar arrays, but we didn't meet that goal. And even worse, replacing Wright's expensive copper roof had to come first. So that left us with only $35,000 for solar energy. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago, we created a sustainability ministry team and took additional steps towards becoming green. We identified potential sites on the flat roofs of the 1960s edition, as well as in our parking lot and on our grounds. And then we finally solicited 4 solar proposals focusing on the flat roofs. Next slide, please. We went with the most ambitious, an 83 kilowatt system from Full Spectrum Solar. The panels were placed on roofs that are not a part of the original Frank Lloyd Wright structure. As you can imagine, that would not have worked very well with our parishioners. Next slide, please. The cost was much higher than what our capital campaign had promised. But fortunately, we received grants from Renew Wisconsin and Focus on Energy, and we financed the rest through the Legacy Solar Co-op. Next slide, please. Last October, we finally cut the ribbon on our long-sought solar system. The system came online the following month. Next slide, please. So here you can see some of the panels. On the left, over the entrance to our new 2008 edition, and on the right, on a flat roof over some of our classrooms. Next slide, please. In January, when I gave this talk for the first time at the Renewable Energy Summit, it was too early to predict annual production numbers with any certainty. But now, after 8 months, it looks like we're going to generate 90,000 kilowatt hours for the year, about what our installer, Full Spectrum, had estimated. Next slide, please. As the solar project proceeded, we hired HGA architects and engineers to help us reduce our electrical consumption, especially the amount of energy that our geothermal pumps were using. Next slide, please. Improving heating, ventilation, and air conditioning efficiency will have roughly the same effect as our solar project. And together, the two of them will reduce our conventional electrical consumption and related emissions by about a half. Next slide, please. We're excited at First Unitarian about how green we're becoming in both senses of the word. And we want to help others to do the same thing. So we've started Array It Forward, an effort to inspire other nonprofits to provide advice and possibly some seed money for solar projects. And you'll hear about that later in the webinar. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. I think we have our poll ready now to go. Morgan, do you have that poll ready?
Yep, I will launch it. If you guys could please fill us out, that would be really helpful.
Okay, so we just want to know, especially going on here for the rest of the talk, where y'all are coming from. So please fill out the form. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. And
then it looks like we had a question come in, so we can get to that after the poll. All right, thank
As
you
the-
everyone for filling that out. Let's see.
So Morgan, I cannot see the poll. Can you just kind of give us the results of that?
Yep, it looks like we
from?
have about 15 people, both from nonprofit and solar developers or contractors, and a handful government and school, also a handful from tech and business and utility.
Great.
So thank you.
Good to know. And yes, we did get a question come in. This is from Mike. It says, it asks, by installing a PV system so large, are they getting credit at the retail rate or at the avoided cost rate? Nancy, I believe that is at the retail rate, but you might know that more than I do, or maybe even Kurt knows that more than I do.
Yeah. Yes, it's at the retail rate.
Great. Okay. And I'm sorry, I did not pause at the end of the solar overview, just kind of the basics. So if there are any questions on that, feel free to type them in. Otherwise, you can certainly type them in and we'll address those questions at the end of the talk too. But for now, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the programs and incentives that are available out there for nonprofits. Nancy showed a slide that detailed a little bit about some of the programs and some of the grants and other things that First Unitarian did. We're going to touch on those a little bit too, because those programs and those grants and incentives are really important. Solar has declined quite a bit in the last decade, about 75 to 85%, depending on where in the country you are and what size array is being installed. But they're still not free, certainly. And that's why those programs and incentives are really important, because while the cost has dropped significantly, it's still not available to everyone. Some of the main reasons for that decline in cost have been through technology, but more so through economies of scale. The yellow line on this graph here indicates what the price of solar has done over the last 10 years, and the blue bars on the graph indicate the amount of solar that has been installed. So as you can see, as solar production and installation has ramped up, the price has come down too. But like I said, still expensive, especially for a nonprofit organization that may have a very tight budget. So we're going to go through now a few ways that you can lower that budget or lower that cost. And the first one that almost every nonprofit, the first source of rebates and additional funding that most nonprofits go to is Focus on Energy. If you have not heard of Focus on Energy, I definitely implore you to go Google them after this talk. Focus on Energy has rebates and incentives on everything from light bulbs to solar arrays. So it's a very important program. The incentive that is available for solar energy through the Focus on Energy program is laid out right here. So as you can see, it depends on what size array you install, but there are some pretty large incentives to be had that can definitely take that out-of-pocket cost, if you will, for your nonprofit down a little bit. So this is a really important figure and a really important incentive that everyone should make sure that they're aware of. Most of our solar contractors are aware of this too. I think all of them are actually. So they should be able to get you in touch with the information that you need to apply for those grants. And another thing that I wanted to mention here really briefly, Nancy mentioned energy efficiency. That is really important too. In fact, we actually suggest that organizations look into their efficiency before they go down the road of installing solar. Ultimately, the kilowatt hour that you don't have to use is going to be the cheapest one. So if you can curb your total consumption, that's really the best way forward. It also means you're going to need to install a smaller array, and that's going to save you money in the long term as well. So Focus on Energy is the first program or incentive that we look at. Another program, I heard there were a few folks on the call from schools. There's a great program through the Midwest Renewable Energy Association called Solar on Schools. This program is funded by the Couliard Solar Foundation that we talked about a little bit earlier. This program is strictly for public schools, and what that program offers is free solar panels for a school that wants to go solar. If you are looking at a 100 kilowatt array or lower, Solar on Schools can provide as much as half of those solar panels for free. If you're looking at a larger solar array above 100 kilowatts, they can provide up to 50 kilowatts of solar panels. So if you are from a public school system, definitely look into that program. Morgan, if you can put that in the chat, if you haven't already, that would be great. So folks can reference that program. The other sort of sister program to Solar on Schools is Solar for Good, and this is the program that I manage. Solar for Good has been around now since the fall of 2017, so we're going into our seventh cycle, I believe. And we've had a lot of great success. Ultimately, the goal is to expand solar power among mission-based nonprofits and houses of worship. The main reason for this grant, which is what it is, grant or program, is because nonprofits, being a tax-exempt organization, cannot take advantage of some of the tax credits that businesses and homeowners can take advantage of. So that is why this program exists. What Solar for Good offers is also free solar panels, essentially. That's why Solar for Good and Solar on Schools are so close together. For smaller arrays, 5 to 75 kilowatts, an organization can receive up to 75 solar panels. It's about $10,000 worth of materials. It's actually a little bit more than that. I think it's around $11,000 or $12,000. And for solar arrays that are above 75 kilowatts, which we would consider a large array, organizations can receive potentially up to 150 solar panels. So quite a big bang for your buck there if you are looking at ways to offset your costs as a nonprofit. We also offer some engineering reviews and site assessment grants as well. So that is another thing that you can think about if you're really just starting out on your solar journey. We do offer some incentives and some help to let organizations get started on this path. So Solar for Good has, like I said, this is going to be our 7th cycle now, beginning in the fall. Special for this fall round of Solar for Good, we're going to be offering a supplemental round of cash grants as well. So if you're an organization interested in going solar, you can submit an application. The application can indicate whether you are applying for the cash grant or the solar panel grant. But this is, like I said, just another way that we are trying to expand solar as much as we can. So we at Renew definitely anticipate that the cash grant portion of our fall 2020 round is going to be very competitive. But essentially, we offer pretty much the same thing as the solar panel material donation would be. So these grants are going to offset roughly 20% of the cost of the solar array. There is a max of $10,000 for systems under 75 kilowatts, and there's also a max for $20,000 for systems that are over 75 kilowatts. So we're really excited to be able to offer this supplemental cash grant round. We did have some funds left over from some previous rounds, and thanks to some other outside donors, we have been able to increase those funds even further. And that is largely one of our main donors to that program outside of the Couliard Solar Foundation is First Unitarian Society and Array It Forward. And I just want to first thank Nancy and First Unitarian again for helping us out with those grants. And Nancy, I'm going to turn it back over to you briefly, just in case you want to say anything else about Array It Forward or what First Unitarian Society aims to do through Array It Forward.
Right. Thanks, Sam. Yes, the reason that we did this is because one of our core Unitarian Universalist principles is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So we at First Unitarian felt a need to translate that concern and that reverence for the natural world into action. And one of the ways that we've done this is through the Array It Forward project. We looked at the fact that in Wisconsin, we still are burning coal at the rate of 42% of all of our electricity. And of course, that emits lots of greenhouse gases. And it's even worse that this coal comes from Wyoming, which means that has to be transported here using other fossil fuels and heating up the globe even more so. So what we wanted to do is as of course Renew Wisconsin wants to do, is to displace as much fossil fuel as we could with solar power. And from our own experience, which you heard about earlier, we know that mounting solar arrays on our property has helped us to lower our carbon footprint and also simultaneously save money on our electric bills. Having solar panels on our roof has also inspired our members to install and promote solar arrays on their own homes and at their workplaces. So Array It Forward was created to assist other congregations and other 501c3s in their solar efforts, helping you, for instance, to navigate the regulatory and financial steps that are involved and assist in funding to initiate some of these projects. So to help with the financing, we've created the Array It Forward Fund, and this is pretty new. It was wonderful to work with Renew and find out that they would be willing to oversee this and help us, decide where the money goes, because they have a lot more information than we do about what is needed. So this fund is administered by Renew Wisconsin, and it prioritizes nonprofits of Black and Indigenous people of color, as well as nonprofits with fewer financial resources. So we want your nonprofit to lower its carbon footprint while saving money at the same time, and we would love to help. So as you can see on this slide, there's my name and my email address. If you're interested in our additional help, please give us a ring. And if you just want to make a donation to the Array It Forward Fund, that is also a wonderful thing to do. All you have to do is write a check to Renew Wisconsin, and in the memo line, write Array It Forward. Thanks, Sam, for this time to let me tell people about our project. We are excited about it, and we want to do as much as we can. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Yes, I cannot say enough.
There was a question actually from Carolyn Betts, which I should also answer. She asked, why wasn't the energy audit that we did done first and then the improvements made before doing the solar project? And actually, the way I wrote it is probably a little bit misleading. Both of those things were ongoing. And actually the energy audit, looking at how to become more efficient, actually started before the solar project, but both of them happened essentially at the same time. That's what I wanted to tell Carolyn. Thanks, Sam.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, and I just want to say thanks again to everyone associated with First Unitarian Society and for Array It Forward for providing these funds for us. It really just goes to show how great the Solar for Good program can be. Not only have we affected nonprofits in our state, but we're also, that effect is causing effect on other organizations too. So it's really exciting. Wanted to mention one other program that I forgot to put in the slideshow. That is for Madison, Wisconsin-based nonprofits. There is an additional grant that you can apply through the city of Madison. And Morgan, if you can put up the backyard solar grant information in the chat room, that would be great. So this is another way that, this is another grant opportunity for nonprofits to help alleviate some of those upfront costs. Again, it is only for organizations within the city of Madison, however, so, but definitely something to think about if you are one of those organizations. So now I am going to, we're going to talk about financials in just a little bit, but I want to now hand it over to Kurt and Legacy Solar Co-op. So Kurt, you can start. I'm going to switch my slideshow over to yours, and so you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, Sam and Morgan, and thank you, Nancy, for a wonderful presentation. It was great working with you and Mark and everybody over at First Unitarian when we did that project. Sometimes with nonprofits, you know, it takes a little while for things to develop because you are at a disadvantage given the fact that you can't use the traditional tax benefits. So one of the things that I've worked on over the last 8 or 10 years has been how to create a community solar program that focuses on achieving similar cost profiles for nonprofit and community organizations. And so we've done that through the formation of a cooperative, which allows our members to buy bonds, and then we collect those bonds, and we 100% of that money that is from the bond loan fund goes to finance solar projects for community organizations. So we've been fairly successful. To date, we've got about a $1.1 million in bonds and solar loans over 28 organizations since 2014, and lots of co-ops, farms, churches, libraries, one VFW, some businesses, low-income housing authorities, city halls, humane societies, and lots of houses of faith. So what is Legacy Solar Co-op? So we are a member-owned, Wisconsin-based cooperative with 193 members to date. It's $100 to become a lifetime member of the co-op, and it allows you to participate in helping local community organizations, maybe in your locality, in your neighborhood, in your community, or elsewhere in the state of Wisconsin, to grow solar. Our mission is to support solar growth all over Wisconsin, and there are 4 ways in which our co-op accomplishes this. The first is that we consult with churches, libraries, schools, and other community institutions doing solar feasibility and tax financing analysis. We specialize in helping to achieve some of the same project financial profiles as if you were a taxable firm, but we have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Low-income housing tax credits had a similar history in which they took public and private funds, and they were able to create good in our communities, and then the not-for-profit was able to lower their operating costs through the use of this energy saving and energy generating technologies. So the other thing we do is project financing through the sale of $250 co-op bonds. We have some $250 co-op bond holders. Most of our bond holders in our cooperative invest $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. Like I said, we have over $1.1 million in co-op bonds and loans that we have made for solar projects. And then we also participate in administering solar group buys for residential and small businesses, similar to what Renew Wisconsin and MREA does. There are so many communities, so many counties in the state of Wisconsin that could benefit from the buying power of a solar group buy. And so we're helping provide some of those services as well. And then lastly, the co-op is a marketplace for solar offsets. So we buy solar offsets from a lot of our solar projects, and then because that allows them to reduce their costs even further by sharing some of their solar output to individuals and businesses who are not able to put solar on their homes or their businesses for whatever reason, but they want to show that they support solar, and they want to show that they are offsetting their carbon footprint from their electricity use or from their travel, and they do so by buying solar offsets through the co-op. one one kilowatt hour is worth about 1.39 pounds of CO2. So we quantify it, and it's a very high quality. It's the highest quality solar offset you can get. Is actually a measurable renewable energy certificate. So that's another way that we support local solar and solar in Wisconsin. Next slide, please. Now, on the tax financing side, there really are 3 ingredients to help reduce the cost of solar for nonprofits and for farms and co-ops and other organizations that can't readily use the tax credit. The tax credit, by the way, right now is at 26% of the overall project. And so that 26% plus the value of depreciation is a valuable tool for organizations to help reduce the cost of solar. But you can't do that unless you're able to jump through some hoops if you're a nonprofit. So the first ingredient is the institution itself. So that's where the solar project is located. But you also need a tax sponsor, and a tax sponsor is someone who pays more in income taxes than the value of their tax credit and depreciation for that solar project. And there'll be an example in just a minute. Usually a tax sponsor is someone who is a member of the hosting community institution. It could be a booster for the local library, or a congregant in a church, or a community member who wants to help support solar on a school or on a city hall. Legacy Solar Co-op helps provide the technical assistance and financing, and brings all of these mechanisms together to reduce the cost as much as possible to all parties. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to take you through just a little bit of a diagram here. So the first ingredient that we talked about already is the host site in the community. And when you put solar on the roof, you're able to use the electricity on site. And as Sam had explained earlier in the net metering example, you will export some of that electricity, but the value of that electricity is conserved because the meter turns backwards, and you're exporting, and you're hopefully getting retail rate net metering out of that. The tax sponsor is the second ingredient, and the tax sponsor, basically what they need to do is they need to sign a roof lease. They lease the roof space on the church, the library, or the school, and then they sign with the host site a solar services agreement. Next. So the energy savings are shared between the host site and the tax sponsor. And next, the renewable energy certificates from the project are owned by nope, not yet. Owner of the renewable energy credits goes from the tax sponsor who owns the solar panels temporarily to the church. Now, that's all fine and good. Those are the 2 main ingredients. Now, the third element we'll bring in now, thank you, is the co-op. So now what the co-op can do is we would leverage additional support from the congregation, from the church, the library, or the school, other members of the community. So the tax sponsor is a very important role, but if there are other folks who want to support that project, they can buy bonds for $250 a piece. And if they want to support that project, each $250 bond is equivalent to 1 solar panel that is being hosted by the church, library, or school. So it's a nice way to leverage additional community support. The co-op makes a secured loan to the tax sponsor. The tax sponsor uses the energy savings shared agreement to pay back the loan. And then lastly, the host site can become a member of the co-op. So that's where some organizations, like a church that has a foundation, or a library that has a foundation, that foundation can become a member of the co-op. buy $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of bonds. And then that's one way that we are able to leverage some of that buying power by making a loan to the tax sponsor, who is able to use that as and take a tax credit for all of that. You need to be able to vet this with your tax advisor. So we basically deal with a lot of attorneys, a lot of CPAs over the years, but we've designed a system that is pretty easy to replicate and reduces the costs as much as possible for all parties. So everybody wins. But the engine that drives the whole process is that solar array and the energy savings from the solar array. Okay, next, thanks. So let's just use let's just use a $100,000 solar project example. If you have a tax credit, that's worth $26,000. We'll hold up right here for a second, minus 13,000 or 30,000. So the value of depreciation depends on the income tax rate of the tax sponsor. Some tax sponsors may be in a lower income bracket, and 15% is what the value of depreciation is on that. The 35% tax rate would be one of the higher ones. So the value of depreciation can vary from $13,000 to $30,000 on that one example. The next one, please. So the net cost for the project, if you're in the 15% tax bracket, would be roughly $61,000. Next, please. And the net cost of a project from a 35% tax bracket would be about $43,000. So that's over 50% of the cost of the system can be reduced by the tax benefits. So rather than paying $100,000 up front, the host site can pay roughly $1,000 to get things started. And then next. And then what happens, you enter into that solar services agreement you saw on the previous page. The community institution owns a minority share of the project, usually the value of the donated solar panels, or the value of the grants, or the value of the Focus on Energy award for their solar project. That's usually their share of the project. The rest of the project is owned by the tax sponsor LLC, and that is for a minimum of 5 to 6 years. That's an IRS requirement. And then the tax sponsor sells the RECs and the solar bill savings. We call them negawatt hours because it's reducing your bill by kilowatt hours, but they're negawatt hours, negative to the landlord. And then the energy savings that are generated by the solar is the engine that helps pay everybody back over time. Next, please. The host site has the option to buy out the system starting in year 6 at fair market value, can be around 50%. Every project is different. But as you can see, taking $100,000 solar project example, and that's not including any of the other incentives and benefits that Sam has already indicated. This is just the tax benefits alone. You can reduce the cost of your solar project by about 50%. There are many IRS rules and utility rules and securities law regulatory rules that are part of this. And so we have been very careful over the years to comply with every single regulatory authority. And like I said, we've done over 30 projects, lots of nonprofits, but also farms and co-ops that also sometimes have a hard time using those tax benefits. Next, please. Just a few examples. So School Sisters of St. Francis of St. Joseph's Convent in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The School Sisters bought over $400,000 worth of bonds, and so they basically are saving about 40% off of the cost of their project just by investing directly through a tax sponsor. Next. And then the Willie Street Co-op. This was one of the first projects in Madison that we did. Next, please. Also Zion Community Church. So this is actually underneath that roof is where I'm sitting right now, because our office is located in this church in Madison, Wisconsin. I was the tax sponsor actually back in 2014 for this project after my mother passed away. And so I wanted to basically make some of her legacy from you know, from her estate went to support this project. And this is not just solar, this is also energy efficiency. I'm sitting in an office under LED lights that were installed in 2014 along with these solar panels on the roof. Half of the energy savings in this church come from the lighting and energy efficiency, and half come from the solar. So it's a nice way to dovetail those different technologies into one tax efficient investment. Okay, next. Also, we work with Wisconsin Farmers Union, and so one of the first farms that we help put solar on is in Lincoln County, the Brighton Moser Family Farm and Dairy Farm. Next. So how can you get involved with us? Basically, the way to get started is to do a matching grant to get some technical help, because really there is a lot of time involved with looking at your electric bills, looking at your roof, and obviously a lot of the solar installers that are on the line here can testify to the fact that you know, they will do really sound solar site assessments prior to giving you a proposal. But then once you have that proposal, to put it through the tax financing mechanism does take a little bit of time. So to pay for some of our time, we're not a not-for-profit, we're a for-profit cooperative, but we basically run like a not-for-profit because we're you know, we're not owned by any one individual. 193 individuals and organizations own the co-op. So we do fee for service. So it's not a very large amount of investment, but Renew Wisconsin, through some of their donors, are willing to match a $200 to $500 matching grant to help pay for some of our time, to help you find an internal champion. And well, maybe you have an internal champion already, someone who's really motivated, kind of like Nancy and Mark from FUS and Eric Sundquist from First Unitarian Society. Without an internal champion, there's just no way some of these projects can get built and save 50% of you know, your energy, but 50% of your costs. And then it takes a little bit of time. So to get started for a 2021 project, there's possibility that we could do a 2020 project, but most likely at this point, 2021 projects will still be eligible for 23% tax credit. But if you already are halfway down that road for 2020, 2021, we can get a what's called a safe harbor allocation. So you can still get the 26% instead of 23%, but you need to be able to buy some of that material for your solar project in 2020 to finish the project in 2021. Now, to become a member of the co-op, pretty easy. Members can buy bonds and help raise funds for solar projects. Members get discounts on consulting. Members can buy solar offsets to help support new solar in Wisconsin. And you know, $5 to $25 per month for residential solar offset will you know, will show you exactly where your solar came from, whether it was a church, a library, or a school, and they're sharing some of their offsets to help defray the cost of the solar project. A lot of our emphasis on this program, though, is to support new projects. So we'll buy RECs right off the bat from a new project up to 50%. So there's no double dipping. We'll not buy more than 50% of the RECs from any one individual or organization, because we really want that individual, that organization, if they're going to claim to be using solar power, is that we will share the solar power claims with you, but we're not going to buy all of your RECs. So that's it for my presentation. I think you can get a hold of us at info@legacysolarcoop.org, and we have lots of great team members. Jackie Harrison Jewell is our office administrator, and we've got Tony Hartman, who does a lot of business development, and we also have other folks who help us out. And we could use help too. So if you're interested in joining the co-op to participate, to help, to work, and maybe even to get paid, let us know. Thanks for the opportunity to talk, Sam, and see if there are any questions, I guess.
We did
Great.
have a
Thanks
couple
a lot, Kurt.
questions. We did have a couple questions come in throughout the presentation. First, Sam, we'll circle back to you.
Morgan, let's save those for the end.
Okay.
We just have a couple more slides left.
Okay.
So I just
my
wanted
bad.
to go over some other financial information, ways to pay for these solar arrays as a nonprofit. Like we said, it's not necessarily as straightforward as if you're a business or if you're another type of organization, but there are definitely some ways to do it. Legacy Solar Co-op being one way, certainly. Another way that's very common for a lot of organizations, especially churches, is to do a capital fundraising campaign. Another way would be through private donors. An additional way, this is kind of a new, or I should say not new, but an underutilized program, is called PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. This is basically another way that you can finance a solar project. I don't know a lot of the intricate details of the PACE program, but I'd certainly be happy to share those with you after the presentation. And then another way to work on the financial side of these programs is to go through a credit union or bank or some other type of financial institution. A lot of financial institutions will now grant solar loans for these types of projects. So that's definitely something that your organization should think about if you're really committed to going solar. So, sorry, that was a really, really quick, really succinct way of kind of wrapping up the financial information. Basically, there are a lot of different ways to do it. So I'm just gonna, leave this slide up for one more second, and then I'm gonna revisit sort of our ways to go solar. So again, to recap, if you are interested, the best way to do it is to learn about solar and learn about your organization as well, and figure out if solar fits your church, your humane society, your food shelf, et cetera, et cetera. After that, you want to seek out some proposals from some contractors. We can certainly, through the Solar for Good program, help you out with that. We can locate solar contractors in your area. Morgan, if you haven't already, if you could put a link to thank you, for our solar installer map. That's a great way, a great resource to use to look for some solar installers in your area. If you need more help with that, we're certainly around to do that as well. Again, ask questions to both of your solar contractor, of Renew, of Legacy Solar, of other organizations like First Unitarian Society that have already gone through the process. Think a lot about the financials as well. And then, once you've weighed all of the variables, then it's time to make your decision. But make sure you have all the tools available to you before you go ahead and do that. So that's it. We went a little bit over, but we were able to keep it pretty close to the time. I am certainly available for questions. Nancy and Kurt also are available via email. I think they're going to stick around as well. So now, Morgan, why don't we shift to some of the questions that folks had?
Great. I think, Sam, I have a couple for you first. The first one is from Diana, and she asks, is Solar for School available for private K-12 schools?
No, Solar on Schools is for public schools only. However, the Solar for Good program has partnered with private schools in the past. So it's just a matter of knowing which organization to seek out. So for private schools, Solar for Good.
And then another question from Chris. It says, for solar on schools or Solar for Good, since the solar installer is not able to choose their preferred brand of solar modules, who is responsible for any potential costs associated with warranty claims?
That is a good question. Chris, I'll have to get back to you on that. I believe it will be done through the Couliard Solar Foundation or through Speed Solar, but I will need to double check to make sure if that is the case.
A question from Melissa. Is there any availability for a professional to create a drawing of the proposed project to use as part of a proposal packet that our organization would use to raise funds?
That's a very good question. I don't think we have one right now. We do have a flyer. I can try to see if I can share it with folks. Basically detailing, it's just a very simple one-pager, both sides, on all the information we've gone through today. That said, I think for something like that, it might just be best to use a combination of that PDF, which I can share, and maybe talking with First Unitarian or possibly with Legacy. Kurt, it looks like you have something to say.
Sorry. Yeah, so we do have one of our members who's a longtime specialist in 3D imaging, specializes in that. So yeah, we can offer 3D rendition services. It's through SketchUp. So we have somebody who's really fast and really good with that. So we just need a really good photograph and measurements, perhaps for certain parts of the building, and then we can put that into the software and get you that imaging so that you can see what the solar project can look like with different layouts.
Our experience is that the installer also does that sort of thing. So
yeah, we actually did it for FUS when we did the visualization.
Okay, good. Yeah. I had forgotten that. Thanks for
no worries. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and I did want to make one more mention too, for churches or for other faith-based communities, there are additional financial or grant resources available through Renew Wisconsin and Wisconsin Green Muslims that you can use to get started if you're a church that's just kind of thinking about this. We do offer some incentives there to get you started on the path. So thank you, Huda, for reminding me of that. I apologize. Okay, do we have another question, Morgan?
I think that covers it. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to type them into the chat and we'll hang around for a couple more minutes.
Yes, and like I said, our contact information there is available for everyone. If you have questions later on, certainly feel free to contact any of us. And I just wanted to, before everyone logs off, I just wanted to say thanks again for taking the time out of your busy days to learn a little bit more about solar, and especially more about solar for nonprofits and how solar energy can really help save money for nonprofits over the long period of time. So thanks again, and we will again stick around for a little bit longer.
Well, thanks, Sam and Morgan, for putting this together, and really good to hear your singing voice, Nancy, and all of the information from your experience for you and Mark for the FUS project. Very inspiring.
I could add that I wrote that chant for the student youth strike, the youth climate strike last September, because First Unitarian really was trying to organize adult support for that youth strike. It was a great experience.
Yeah. There's lots of great positive energy out there for clean energy and for the environment and coming together. Now we've got all kinds of other challenges too. So thanks for bringing up the, the Black and other minority group emphasis for Array It Forward. I think that's awesome.
Kurt, we did have a question come in too from Kim, and that is, does using Legacy Solar Co-op make sense for a smaller nonprofit array less than 10 kilowatts?
Yeah, it's, the work that I do, a lot of it's labor of love, but it's, the smaller projects like that, we usually take just as much time as a larger project. But yeah, 10 or 20 kilowatts is kind of the fix. If you're a member of the co-op already, we're more likely going to bend over backwards to do what we can to help you because you're one of the owners of the co-op. So yeah, we'll consider member projects before at that small size, but you don't have to be a member of the co-op in order to take advantage of our services.
All right, well, looks like those are all the questions. So thanks again to everyone out there for tuning in today and for sticking around a little bit after our scheduled end time. So thanks again, and good luck with all your solar projects.
Thanks, Sam.